Hello. Today we are reading chapters 56 through 58 of The Wild Robot Escapes, written and illustrated by Peter Brown. Chapter 56, The Torch. Our friends were stuck in that tree. They sat in the upper branches high above the wolves, trying to calculate an escape. Brightbill could fly off whenever he liked, but Roz had to come down eventually. And when she did, the wolves would be ready. Shadow and Barb stretched out in the shade. They glanced around and licked their fur and sniffed the mountain air. The wolves looked comfortable, and yet there was tension between them. "I'm hungry," growled Barb. "I want to eat rabbits and deer, or maybe go back to farm country and prey on livestock. Anything is better than hunting a creature that can't be eaten." You can eat all the animals you like," said Shadow, "after we kill the robot." Barb grumbled with frustration. She didn't understand Shadow's need for revenge, but for now she stayed loyal to her mate. Day turned to night and the wolves started yawning. Barb's eyelids became heavy. Shadow's body became weary. Then the soothing song of the crickets lulled them both to sleep. The sight of sleeping wolves reminded Roz of those long winter nights on the island when wild animals crawled into her warm home and slept. She remembered the frightened look in their eyes as they saw fire for the first time. And this gave Roz an idea. Quietly, she broke off a dead branch from the tree trunk. Then she took the lighter from her tool belt and held a flame under the branch's knobby end until it was blazing. And then she dropped down to the ground. Shadow and Barb snapped awake to find the world bathed in orange light. Towering above them, looking like a demon, was the robot. Her eyes were glowing. Her mouth was roaring. In her hand was a torch, flames rippling, embers whirling into the air. The wolves had never seen fire. It was beautiful and it was terrible. Deep inside, they felt their wolf instincts telling them this ball of swirling light was dangerous. Their instincts told them to run for their lives, and when Roz lunged toward them, they ran. Barb yelped, Shadow whimpered, and the two wolves raced away from the fire just as fast as they could. Chapter 57, The Stones. At first light, Roz nudged Brightbill awake, and the travelers continued north through the mountains. The goose stood on his mother's shoulder as she marched. His eyes darted around nervously, searching for any sign of the wolves. But the wolves were gone, and our friends turned their attention to a new problem. The weather out there was always changing. Roz and Brightbill had seen many calm, sunny days suddenly turn to wind or fog or sleet, or even snow. Our friends expected bad weather, so they hardly noticed when heavy rain came sweeping down a valley. But there was something odd about this rain. Brightbill squinted at the oncoming storm and said, "Ma, why is the rain bouncing off the ground?" Bouncing rain? That didn't seem right. The robot's computer brain went to work and she found the correct word. "That is not rain," she said. "That is hail." Clang! A hailstone bounced off Roz's chest. Another one swooshed into the weeds. Then the sky opened up and hailstones were everywhere. They tore through leaves and branches. They ricocheted off rocks and roots. They flattened flowers and bushes. To the robot, the hailstones were annoying. To the goose, they were deadly. A stone hit Brightbill's shoulder and he fell to the ground. Roz scooped him up, hunching over, protecting him from the falling stones. But the hailstorm might kill the poor bird if they couldn't find cover soon. Frantically, the robot scanned the area for any type of shelter. And there it was. On the far side of the valley, beside a winding river, was a cabin. It was old and shabby, but it had a roof, and that's what our friends needed most. Roz held her son close, pumped her legs, and thundered across the valley. Heavy hailstones hissed into the grass and squelched into the mud and clanged off our robot. There was a soft thump, and Brightbill cried out in pain. Roz bounded over the rushing river in a single leap, landed without breaking stride, and kept running. Now she could hear hailstones cracking against the cabin, louder and louder. The robot stomped up to the front door, turned the handle, and stepped inside. Chapter 58, The Cabin. The hailstorm was brief but violent. Its icy stones were quickly melting away, but the damage would linger on. The valley was littered with shredded leaves and wildflowers. Wounded animals were hobbling back to their homes. Several unlucky birds lay limp in the grass. Inside the cabin, Roz was standing by the window. She held Bright Bill in her arms, his bruised body wrapped in an old blanket. The robot knew everything there was to know about caring for animals, but all her son needed was time. His injuries would heal on their own. "Go on without me, Ma," said the goose in a weak voice. "I'll catch up to you when I'm feeling better." "That is ridiculous," said the robot. "What kind of mother would leave her injured son behind?" "But, Ma—" "Stop talking," interrupted Roz. "You need to rest." Brightbill tried to argue, but he was already falling asleep. The cabin was simple, just a square room with a wood stove, 2 chairs beside a table, and a couple of cots rotting in the corner. Dusty mugs and bowls sat on a shelf. Otherwise, the walls were bare. It was clear no humans had been there for a very long time. However, it seemed that some other creature had moved in. The whole place had a foul odor. Lumps of feces were strewn about, and little footprints trailed away from a dark hole in the floor. Roz leaned over the hole, and in the language of the animals, she said, "Hello, is anyone down there?" Something moved, and then a pair of shining eyes looked up from the darkness. "Who are you?" said a voice. "I didn't invite you into my home." "I am sorry to intrude," said the robot. "My son and I were only trying to escape the hailstorm." "Your son?" said the voice. "Is that him in your arms? Let me see." Very gently, the robot lifted a fold of cloth and revealed the sleeping goose. "He must take after his father," said the voice. "He is my adopted son," the robot explained. "My name is Roz, and this is Bright Bill." The shining eyes blinked, and the voice squeaked with excitement. "You're Roz and Bright Bill? The birds have been singing about you for months. You're living legends." "Technically, I am not living," said the robot. "You seem pretty alive to me," said the voice. "Either way, it's nice to meet you. They call me Sprinkles." With that, the creature crawled up through the hole in the floor. She was covered in black fur from her nose all the way to the tip of her fluffy tail. Well, except for those white stripes running down her back. You see, Sprinkles was a skunk. The robot took one look at her and stepped backward. Sprinkles frowned. "You know, Roz, skunks only get stinky when we're nervous." "Are you nervous now?" "Well, sort of, but in a good way. I'm honored to meet you. Please pull up a seat and tell me what brings you here." Sprinkles hopped onto the table and listened as Roz described their journey. The skunk was a very good listener. While Roz spoke, Sprinkles nodded politely and said things like, "Oh my," and "Is that right?" and "You don't say." This went on until Bright Bill began to stir. "Ma, I'm thirsty," he whispered. "There's a creek right out back," said Sprinkles, "and those might be useful." She motioned to the bowls on the shelf. "Please help yourself to anything. My home is your home." It turns out skunks can be quite hospitable. Sprinkles invited the visitors to stay as long as they liked, and so our friends spent Bright Bill's recovery in the cabin. The goose mostly slept. The robot brought him water and food. The skunk made sure they both were comfortable. A few mornings later, sunlight streamed in through the window and onto Bright Bill. He was squawking and waddling and fluttering through the cabin. His injuries had healed, and he was eager to continue their journey. "Thank you for everything, Sprinkles." The robot waved as she marched away from the cabin with her son on her shoulder. "Glad I could help," called the skunk. "Misunderstood creatures like us gotta look out for each other."